Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture. Today's episode, Taskmaster Handicap.
Do you want to go first, or shall I?
I'll go first this time.
Okay, cool.
I'm genuinely excited that we're actually finally able to do this, because
I am too, and it's I'm not mad about Zoom, but it is really nice to see your face.
Yeah, it's great.
Also, I have to say something that's going to make you deeply, deeply uncomfortable. But I just I saw this morning the Facebook post that your mum and dad put up to say happy birthday, and your young dad was like super hot. Just saying.
I'll pass that along. I'll mention it.
Yeah, let him know.
Yeah. I might see him this weekend, so we'll...
Like 42 years ago? Yeah.
42 years ago, yeah.
The meaning of life.
Which shouldn't be possible, but it is the answer, so...
But yeah, 42 years ago, your dad was smoking. I'm
trying to think of whether I have any other cinematically relevant birthdays, because when I was 37, I kept thinking of the quote from Michael Palin's line from Holy Grail, where it's, I'm 37, I'm not old, and that kept me going for that year. And 42, I'm clinging with, let's just be honest, an inappropriate amount of desperation to the fact that that Douglas Adams has sort of nestled in this safe haven for people who are turning 42. After this, I think it's probably just the piece of the grave to look forward to, right? I mean,
I'm looking forward to 43 because I like prime numbers. But
maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe it'll just be the next prime number down the line that
I always put if I ever chose, you know sometimes when you speak aloud things that you do as a matter of course, you think, wow. Yeah. Why do I have any friends? I always put a prime number of pepper grinds into a dish.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, I guess in the early stages, that's pretty good. But man, once you pass what would it be? Once you pass 19, you're kind of committed for another bunch.
But I like
19 pepper. 19 would be a commitment.
If it's a big pot, sometimes you need to go all the way up to 43, or even beyond that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
So my word today is...
Let's just move swiftly on from that pile of crazy.
My word today is a relatively short one, but I thought it was kind of cool. It is the word handicap.
Oh.
And do you know are you familiar with the backstory of this one? This is one of those ones. Okay, this is one of those ones that it could have been a fairly boring conversation for you, because there's a fairly quick little, it's one of those ones you see in a meme format sometimes.
Sure, okay.
So if you knew the punchline, it'd be kind of a boring conversation for you. But I'd still do it because it's not about you, Amy. It's about the people.
I'm sorry, what? What are you
there
talking
are people
about?
Here? What's happening right now?
No, I meant it's not about me.
Oh, right, yeah.
Absolutely
Sorry.
Does not compute.
I should have eased into that. Sorry.
Yeah, just dropping
slap bombshells
me in the face.
like this.
Why don't you?
This is why I'm not a doctor. Reason 487. This word was around by the mid-1600s.
Okay.
So the earliest OED citation comes from 1653, and it actually describes a game. And this game was being played way longer ago than the mid-1600s, because it actually shows up in Piers Plowman.
Oh, man.
So
I love Piers Plowman.
Yeah. At the time, the game was called New Fair, Fair, in Piers Plowman. But it's the same game. But by the mid-1600s, it was called Handicap. And basically, and it comes from, the game was also, it was a shortening of hand in cap.
Right.
Here's how the game worked. It was a trading game. Now, I'm not like...
Gotta catch them all.
It's the first Pokemon.
Piers Plowman, gotta catch them all. I'm there for Piers Plowman Pokemon. I don't even understand Pokemon, but still, if it has Piers Plowman in it, it's got my attention.
I'm in. So let's say there's two people who want to trade goods, and if you can imagine, when you're figuring out, now we've got this unified system of currency all over the place, and everyone's kind of agreed that X costs Y, and that's just how it goes. But if you can imagine that I had a wheel of cheese that you wanted, and you had...
I do want a wheel of cheese.
The ability to rethatch my roof that I wanted, it's not immediately apparent how much of your work is worth my wheel of cheese or vice versa, or whatever the two things are worth, right? So what would happen is there would be a third impartial umpire that was brought in, and that person would make a determination on whether you needed something else to top up the trade. Usually just money. Like, you can trade you a wheel of cheese plus $30 and you'll come and wash my windows, or whatever it is. So when the umpire had just determined how to equalize the value of the trade, there would be a hat, and all three people would put a I guess, predetermined amount of money into the hat. And then the two people who wanted to trade would put their hands in the hat, and they would draw them out either closed or open. If the hand was open, it meant they agreed with the umpire and they wanted to do the trade as described. If the hand was closed, they didn't want to. So if they both draw it out open, so they both agree, then they make the trade as described by the umpire, and the umpire gets the money that was in the hat for his or her services.
Oh, okay, cool.
If both players disagree, so they both draw their hand out closed and they disagree, they keep their stuff, the trade doesn't happen, the umpire gets the money because they've been a part of this thing that has wasted their time. If only one player agrees and the other doesn't, then the trade still doesn't happen because they don't agree on the trade, but the one who agreed keeps the hat money.
Ooh.
And I was thinking about this, and it's like, I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about this game and how to parse it in my own head, because I can't parse it in anyone else's. I
mean, you can try, but people get upset.
They really don't like it.
And the tools, they're so tiny and sharp.
That guy in my basement will not shut up.
Parsing time.
Yeah. So I think what it is it's just sort of, it's an incentive to be more inclined to agree than not to the trade.
Got you.
Because the incentive is, if you agree, if you're the only one who agrees, you get to keep that forfeit money. So there's a bonus to agreeing. So you're not wasting everyone's time.
This is like a quiz show or a game show or something, isn't it?
So that's what I couldn't really understand. Like, it keeps being described as a game, which I guess it is. But I guess what it is if two people can't agree on something and you just do rock, paper, scissors to, figure it out. Yes, you are using that to make an actual real world determination of what's going to happen to you, but also it is a game.
Yeah.
But with this one, there's actually, people are actually being paid for their time in this game, so it doesn't seem like so much a game as it does just a mechanism for society to keep working in a barter system. But I think that's why the player agreeing gets to keep the money, because otherwise, they don't, even though the umpire is the one getting the money, you don't want people going into this frivolously intending to disagree just to be contrarian. So I think that's what anyway, so that is the game Handicap, or formerly known as New Fair, as referred to in Piers Plowman. And that was shortened to Handicap at that time. Like, it was in the mid 1600s, it was already called Handicap or Hand in Cap, and it started being interchangeable. Fast forward about 100 years, mid 1700s, the term starts getting adopted into horse racing. And a handicap was, it referred to the race itself. And any race where one of the horses was deemed to be better than the rest of them, and so had weight added to, like, saddlebags or whatever, to try to slow them down a little bit and level the playing field. And what would happen is the owners of the horses would play that. Originally, the owners of the horses would play that game just to signify their agreement of whether or not they agreed to that whole, no, you're not adding 20 pounds to my horse,
yeah,
or
sure.
whatever.
Ah, okay.
But the word referred to the race itself. So if there was a handicap race or a handicap going on, it was a horse race where one of the horses was weighted down because of whatever.
I've certainly heard that term used in reference to horse racing, which
really?
I was horribly exposed to as when I was young and a student. I worked in a pub, and it was a very sort of traditional old man pub, and there was a little cadre of men who would come in during the day, and there was a bookies, a betting shop, just 2 or 3 buildings down from the pub, and they'd spend the whole day. They'd put money into a kitty, and then they'd just go back and forward, choosing their bets, and it was very sociable and nice. They weren't ever like looking to win thousands of pounds, but holy fuck, horse racing's boring. Yeah. It's so boring. It's
Why do you think they had to add gambling?
Exactly. If you're not gambling, you do not care. And I hated it, and I always used to complain, oh God, we've got the horses on again. Until it got to the summer and it was time for golf. And then I was like, please, can we have the horses?
Please, can we have the horses back?
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
I wonder if that's the origin of polo. People were like, they stopped doing horse racing and did golf. It's like, you know what we could do is we could add horses to this shit. And then it would at least be a watchable product.
I feel like both golfers and polo players would be horribly offended by that idea. But
I could not be more here for that.
I'm basing this mainly on the fact that I feel like people who play golf or polo are more likely to be offended than the average bear. Maybe that's an unfair stereotype. I don't know.
I feel like I've just added an extra thing to the list of ways that I can make my day successful is by offending both golfers and polo players. Especially if you do 2 at once. I'm like, oh, today's a good day. This is great. So there's a note in I say mid 1700s. That's when it sort of shows up in writing, and so in the OED. But there's a note in the OED that says that game and the horse racing component was dating back to as early as the 1680s.
Oh, okay.
But the word doesn't appear, and therefore an OED citation doesn't appear, which highlights again the general caveat of, dictionaries describe words that once they get written down, not every word that's ever been used by anyone. So we go forward another century, and we're in...
Just like that.
Just like that. Boom. Mid-1800s. And that's when it started being broadened out to any sporting event.
Okay.
But it still referred to the sporting event. So you could have a swimming competition where one person had started at the other length of the pool, but they had the same number of laps overall, type of thing. Like somebody gets someone is deemed to be too good and gets a competitive disadvantage for everyone else to be able to compete fairly. Yeah, and the event was still called a handicap. And then by the late 1800s, so the change is speeding up a little bit. By the late 1800s, it was broadened out again to refer to anything impeding a person.
Okay.
And so the actual impediment became the handicap. Up until now, it's either the game or the sporting event or whatever. And now it's the actual impediment. And it's just the OED definition is, quote, anything or circumstance which makes progress or success difficult, an encumbrance, a hindrance. So the rain was a handicap to the village fete or whatever. Specifically in the U.S., right around this exact same time, it started to be used as, quote, any condition that limits a person's movements, senses, educational attainment, or activities. And so this is where we get a handicap being the term. It's always hard to be right about these terms, but the term handicap was, for the longest time, for a very, very long time, just that was the most socially acceptable way to describe someone who was otherwise unable to do a thing because of a physical or mental impediment. It was then replaced by disability, and then we get into the modern sort of other euphemistic expressions for it. But this is the start of that, and it started chiefly in the U.S.
I mean, dude, I'm gonna point out to you that once upon a time this is like Amy's life and jobs. I also worked for the Learning Disabilities Service within the National Health Service in Dundee. Briefly, I was the secretary, and because of the nature of the clients that were served by the Learning Disabilities Service, these guys were within the service for their whole lives, and they had a lot of medical notes. So, we kept all those pieces of paper, because that's what secretaries do, and they had big old filing cabinets with records going back to the 60s. And what I would say is that your story thus far of how the word has progressed makes me feel like there have been plenty of worse words used than using this particular word in that particular context. Because at least this word refers to the difficulty.
Right.
Rather than, you know what I'm talking about.
Rather than the person.
You could literally go back through those medical notes over the decades and see in a medical context the changing language being used to describe the clients being served by the Learning Disabilities Service. And it was quite eye-opening.
I bet it would be, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be fascinating. I'm also... this is this recurring theme, the other recurring theme in our podcast, where we discover that you're just better than me because your previous random assortment of jobs involve things like you worked at the Lifelong Learning Center for people with challenges. My past assortment of random crap jobs that I've had is like I swept the floor at a marble countertop factory and I was a traveling cutlery salesman for a bit. So it's they're just different.
Cutlery salesman?
They're just different,
That sounds terrible, dude.
It was bad. I have had some terrible jobs. We had a class in my last year of law school. There was a class. It was a short little intensive class for like 3-week intensive semester that the University of Ottawa for some reason has. And it was small business law for lawyers, but essentially it was like the idea of entrepreneurship in the legal context and all this other stuff. Okay. So one of the things, and the teacher was a practitioner who took a very sort of holistic approach to the whole topic. So a lot of classroom discussion, fairly small class. And at one point, he asked people to describe their best. We went around and everyone talked about their best job and the worst job they'd ever had. And I'm in a context there for that
discussion.
Oh yeah, I'm in it. But and the other interesting thing was, I'm there in a context of a lot of, I'd say 75% of people at the law school had done high school, undergrad law school, and let's be honest about the socioeconomic situation of law students. Some of them had never had a job before. They didn't work in the summer. That they didn't need to. Because why would they? And
you're like old man cutlery over there with your 15 jobs.
Just a damn dinosaur. So I had options for them. So they were like, "What was your best and worst job?" And I'd be like, the best job would be like, "Well, do you want to hear about when I was teaching at a Montessori school in Cambodia?" Or would you like to hear about the gas station I worked at in high school? And it's like, your worst job is like, would you like to hear about when I sold water heaters door to door or cutlery door to door? Or worked at a possibly scammy child safety magazine in their telemarketing department? Like, what do you want from me? I've had a buttload of horrendous jobs. So we could here's my catalog.
Do you mean worst paid, or made me feel like the worst human being for doing that job?
We could sort this in any number of ways. This Excel spreadsheet is customizable, my friend. Anyway.
I discovered this week, I told you about the Dull Men's Club on Facebook, didn't I? It's a Facebook group.
Yes.
It gives me a lot of joy. There are two.
Okay.
I'm in the right one, apparently. That's what the group always says. We're the one that uses bananas for scale. And cool. Someone posted in the Dull Men's Club this week to say that their neighbour or brother-in-law or somebody or other was competing in the World Excel Championships. Like the spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And to be honest, like I used to be very sneering of the spreadsheet people when I was a teacher, because it sometimes seemed like there were teachers who were really good at spreadsheets and not really very much else.
Yeah. But, it's usually it's a pair of circles.
But these days I have occasion to use spreadsheets myself, and I'm starting to realise why they're so satisfying.
Yeah. They're literally 2 weeks ago, I would have been like, yeah, that sounds like the dullest thing in the universe. But I know your general feelings about TikTok, and I understand and respect them. And anyone who has a problem with it, yes, you're right. As with anyone who has a problem with any social media, you're correct. However, one of the things that's interesting about TikTok is that they have nailed this like super quick response algorithm that as soon as you spend just a little bit more than normal time on a single video, you discover that there is a corner of TikTok.
Videos.
I don't know what you call a shape with 700 million sides and corners, but that's what TikTok is. And you will live in one of those corners for like 2 weeks. And for a while, I lived in like Grandmasters of Excel TikTok. And these guys were doing like visualizations. Like Excel can do like maps and like weird other data visualizations. It's all built in. They're showing it on the screen. They're showing you how to do this. And it's like all these like beautiful infographics generated with not but Excel.
Dude, I cannot adequately express to you how much I love a good infographic.
I know. I didn't know you could make the whole thing in Excel.
That's
like,
so cool. I'm probably going to go and TikTok that out.
You're going to have to, and then you're going to have to, you have to wade through it because that's where you live for the next week.
And then I'll hate myself for at least the next month. And then I'll, like, I was about to say disinstall, that's not a word. Then I'll uninstall it from my phone and then, but yeah.
Then you'll come back.
Anyway, sorry. I don't even know whose diversion that was, but we've diverted.
I don't know, but this is what happens. Speaking to the listener, you know what you signed up for by now.
You do, dude. Like,
you've been here long enough. If you haven't been here long enough, welcome. This is it. So buckle up. Anyway, I'm sort of done because that brings us to the modern use of handicap, which I'm not sure why. This is one of those ones where I never begrudge the adaptation of words used to. Because of course, like language changes all the time. That's what we do. But I don't know. I like handicap as a word for physical and mental impediments because just like what you said, it's not
the
person focused
in any way.
It's the impediment.
However, the word came to be used to describe the person, and as soon as you do that, you can make it pejorative, and people did make it pejorative because people suck.
Yeah, because we can't have nice things because people suck.
Yes, we can't have nice things.
It just because, in case anyone is out there going, but you haven't done this yet, you're going to regret saying that because the rest of it is boring. So the component words hand and cap of handicap both have shockingly boring and normal etymologies. Hand is from the German side of the English family and runs very quickly into the of obscure origin fog.
Okay.
So, hand. Cap, similarly, pretty straightforward. It comes from the Latin word for head, which is where we get things like capitulate, capital, per capita, decapitate. Yeah, so that's hand and cap, but that's the least interesting part of the whole thing. So handicap comes from an whatever it is now, 700-year-old game to help people figure out whether a duck is worth cheese.
That's brilliant, dude. I love it. So, also, the description of the game made me think of Carrot in a Box.
Oh.
And for those of you who are not familiar with Carrot in a Box, the reason that Ryan just made that noise, now, that noise could have been interpreted as a groan, like, oh God, Amy, stop talking about this.
Carrot in a Box is my Roman Empire.
Carrot in a Box is like a mini game within the British comedy quiz show 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown, which is a sort of a pastiche of Countdown, the long-running word puzzle show featuring the inestimable Susie Dent. And they mashed it up with a comedy show that used to exist called 8 out of 10 Cats, which was like panel show, surveys, news stories kind of thing. And I don't know why Carrot in a Box came to exist, but Carrot in a Box with Sean Locke and John Richardson, please, please do yourself a favour and look it up on YouTube. And the reason that Ryan groaned is because he's probably experienced physical pain from laughing so much at this situation.
I literally think about this probably weekly. Like I just, and it's
perfect.
Yeah. It's perfect. You have to look up. Just go to YouTube, look up Carrot in a box. And that's the other reason I kind of groaned, is because every time I think of it often, I think of it with unimaginable joy. And then I'm just really sad for a bit because Sean Locke passed away a couple years ago now, I guess. But it's just so good. And for North American listeners who aren't familiar with either 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown or 8 out of 10 Cats or Countdown, Countdown is the ultimate expression of, I think, one of the fundamental differences between British and American society, because the only corollary show that I could think of for American TV. No. Countdown is not a thing here.
I thought it was a worldwide phenomenon.
No, not even close.
It's not even British, Ryan. I'm pretty sure it was French originally.
Possibly, yeah, maybe, but it is not a thing here.
I half thought that it might have been French Canadian, but maybe I just created that in my mind.
I mean, it would have been very brief. I had never my first exposure to Countdown was when Becca and I were in Scotland and we saw an episode of 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown.
No way, I did not know that. That's
Countdown,
brilliant.
the only corollary I could think of, analogy for on American television, would be The Price is Right, because it's a long running show. It's a daytime show. It's the kind of show where I keep hearing about, like, people have nostalgic feelings for it, either because they are older and retired and watch TV during the daytime, or it was like you were home from school sick and it was on TV during the day and you'd watch it, or like college kids like it because it's a thing you can do between, like,
love Countdown.
Students love it. But it's just so funny to me that the American corollary, like, so the British TV has this erudite, like, people doing anagram puzzles and complex math game equation things, and there's a thing called Dictionary Corner, and that's Countdown. And in the States, they have a big TV studio full of screaming people who are trying to guess the price of toothpaste, and it's in the hopes of winning a washer dryer set. Like, it's such a clear delineation between American and British TV, and I think it's the most perfect summary of that difference. But Countdown is awesome. And The Price is Right is awesome.
I genuinely assumed that it existed everywhere, to be honest.
But literally the only product placement you can do in Countdown is dictionaries and calculators. That's it.
Yeah.
Whereas The Price is Right is a 1 hour product placement.
Calculators verboten. No.
No, but you could imagine that's the only thing I could think of. If you had to cram a product, you're not going to do, like, mugs. Nobody's... What?
Mugs.
Well, mugs, yeah, because they all have mugs.
They have Countdown mugs.
They have Countdown mugs. So, whereas The Price is Right is just a non-stop, it's just a one long commercial with an affable old guy spinning a giant wheel. Like, yeah, exactly. So, anyway, Countdown's awesome. Look up Carrot in a Box. Over to you for your word.
Cool. I know. I'm like, time is short. I need to hustle. So I'm quite enjoying that we've gone from one British TV show to another, because my word today is Taskmaster.
Oh, nice.
Again, those of you who do not share Ryan's love of British TV, specifically British TV comedy, you might be thinking, what the hell? What's Taskmaster? What's going on? Why are they responding about this? So I'm going to very, very quickly just outline to you what Taskmaster is. And again, Taskmaster is it's a show that's being syndicated, and I don't know if it's gotten to that particular across that particular pond yet, but there's certainly a New Zealand version, but it is an original British show. There was a very short-run American version. Mm-hmm. And all the episodes of the UK original version are available worldwide on YouTube. Cool. Essentially, Taskmaster features Greg Davies, who is a big British comedian who I love. I mean, he's big. He's a huge, tall man. In every sense, yeah. Yeah, he's great. I can't accurately express how funny this man is. And his role within the show is to give out points based upon the completion of tasks. Now, the tasks are decided by little Alex Horne and his band of merry men. And the contestants are 5. They're usually heavy on comedians, the TV personalities, people who are not necessarily quote-unquote comedians, but who are in some way in the public eye. feature on the show. And so they take these people, these famous people, and they ask them to do these various tasks. One that just like off the top of my head springs to mind, once they had to draw a horse while on a horse. The person who drew the best horse while riding a horse got the most points and won. Now that's, if you're thinking, this sounds like the silliest thing I've ever heard, yes, you are correct.
Correct.
It is super silly and it is wonderful. Now, I'd argue that a big part of the success is the role of the Taskmaster himself. Now, I don't know how this goes in other syndications, but basically, the Taskmaster, he isn't like a Simon Cowell nasty figure. There's a sort of a reason to him, but also his word is absolute law. So he can just say, no, that's cheating, you're a dickhead, I don't like it, no points. And there is no appeal, there is no, in fact, the more you protest, the less likely you are to get the points. And he's just an absolute glorious law unto himself. And that's awesome, basically. I'd say that's awesome. We love this show, Ryan and I, but we talk about it very, very often. It's just super joyful. Like it's like a timeline cleanse TV show. I always think of it like that. Yeah. The Taskmaster is horrendously unpleasant and rude to his assistant, little Alex Horne, and everyone loves it.
Yeah.
So it is, of course, a compound word formed by task and master. That makes sense. So let's have a little look at the old task.
Cool.
So first off, it dates from around about 1400. So again, we're in these earliest sort of OED citations that we've got. And the first meaning that's given is a fixed payment to a king, lord, or feudal superior, an impost, tax, or tribute. And we'll find as we go on that in fact task and tax, it's not a huge leap of the imagination to consider that these words might brush up against each other a little bit in the shady forest of etymology. So a task was it was essentially a tax, a tribute. Okay, and we have that cited in around about 1400 and then again in 1766, and no further citations are given. So it is truly an obsolete usage of the word. And we then get a piece of work imposed, exacted, or undertaken as a duty or the like. Originally, a fixed or specified quantity of labour or work imposed on or exacted from a person. Later, the work appointed or assigned to one as a definite duty. So being given a task to do. And we get that again, 1400, maybe even earlier, 1325. And this usage carries on throughout the years. Interestingly, and I remember this usage actually myself, I think I once worked as a teacher in a school where the use of written punishments it's not quite so common these days because they're super sucky and they don't work. But when I was at school, written punishments were a thing that were kind of given out. And sometimes kids would call them a task. Sometimes they'd be called a punishment exercise, a punny ecce, various names. So I worked at a school once where they called their written exercises consequences. Obviously, the rationale being you've done a thing and the consequence is that you have to complete this written exercise. So like writing lines or usually like copying out pretty meaningless kind of, sometimes you have to like reflect on what you've done, that kind of thing. However, this backfired quite spectacularly when one year the English national exam involved so close, reading a passage and then answering questions to demonstrate your comprehension and understanding. And it contained the word consequence, and none of our kids knew what the fuck was going on because their understanding of the word consequence was that it was a written exercise that you did when you were naughty in school. So beware when you take a word and apply it to a thing that is not the thing that everybody else knows when they use that word.
Yeah.
Interestingly, in psychology, there's a specific usage, a piece of work or an exercise given to a subject in a psychological test or experiment. And sometimes the German word Aufgabe, which means task, is used within that particular context. Lots of usages that are essentially just about doing work. Any piece of work that has to be done. You know, usually it involves labour or difficulty. It's something that you have to do rather than something that you kind of want to do. But there we go. So the etymology of task, the OED tells us it's a borrowing from French. So we get task with a Q-U-E rather than as an S-K.
Ooh, fancy.
And that's from Old Northern French. It stays pretty stable. Medieval Latin had tasca, T-A-S-C-A. And this is from Latin taxare. Now, tax, becoming task, is quite an interesting one. Yeah. Because tax, much older than I thought it would be. I don't know why I'm surprised. You know, what are the things you can rely on? Death and taxes. And it would seem that that's been the case for a really, really, really long time. So Etym Online has tax cited. The first citation of tax is 1300 to impose a tax upon. And tax, it is postulated, which comes from Latin, taxare. Taxare means to evaluate, to estimate, to assess, or to handle. As in, I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to evaluate how much you need to give me of its worth, I guess. And that's probably a form of the Latin tangere, which means to touch. So to tax something, originally, one would touch it. And in fact, it comes from the PIE root tag, T-A-G, which means to touch or to handle. It gives us words, it gives us cognates like attain, contact, contaminate, I guess with your hands, entire, intact, integer. I like this one a lot. An integer is a whole number, but it's intact. It literally, the word literally means it's untouched. So it hasn't been split up or mucked about with. It is a whole number, it's been untouched.
I like contaminate just because you're saying with your hands, but like con as in with, like touched by many people, it's been contaminated.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. Sometimes the etymology just makes sense. Isn't it fun?
Yeah. Weird.
So from integrate we get integrity, so this idea of being like untouchable.
Right.
We also get tact and tactics and tactile, all those words. Tangent, tangible, things you can touch. Task, taste, tax, and taxes. So the task part of Taskmaster is really quite touchy-feely. Nice. So from the tax, we get our tribute that would be paid. And then I presume at some point over the years, either the tribute became less fixed, or the idea of you will do this thing for me in return for that money. And so perhaps that's the kind of reason why task became to refer to the work, the job that had to be done, rather than the payment that had to be made. Right. If that, I guess, makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we get to master. Now, I did one of those big thunk forehead things when I was looking at the word master, purely because, you know, when you read Latin, you think you know how it should be pronounced.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that. To be perfectly honest, when I read Latin, I'm fairly certain I have no idea how it's... I once made the mistake of asking a classics professor at St Andrews, how do we even know that Latin was pronounced that way?
Uh-oh.
Wow. That was a day.
That would be a day.
And the reason for this mental head slap is that the word master, in an etymological sense, comes from the Latin word that if I had been reading it in a book or even reading it aloud, I would have pronounced this word magister. M-A-G-I-S-T-E-R.
Right.
But this word, yeah, you're doing it too. This word gives us master. So there's no way that G was pronounced as a hard G. Magister, magister. I think magister eventually gets our way to master. Now, again, I'm sound changes don't always make as much sense as that one seems to make to me. This is folk etymology, and it's folkiest sense. But also it made me think, just the sounds that I am making make much better sense if that original word is pronounced not the way I've always pronounced it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we get, this is from classical Latin, words like minister also. Mm-hmm. And when this word got into French, we got words like maistre, with all the vowels you can think of.
All of them.
And when it got into Old English, we had the thorn, M thorn, G. But again, magister, meister seems to me to make much better sense. Yeah. If you're a fan of Game of Thrones, either the books or the show, you might be wondering if maesters were ever a thing. And the sound changes described in the OED would seem to suggest that at some point in the evolution of history, master was in fact maester. There have been a whole lot of changes to this sound. However, by sort of Middle English, master's being rhymed with disaster. So we come to see that this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And master also has its roots all the way back. Get your fingers in some pie. Oh, I love pie. Because here's what Etymon Line has to say about it. It's a man having control or authority over a place.
Okay.
A teacher or tutor of children. Interestingly, in Scots, schoolmaster is seen as a very English term. I mean Scots. I don't mean like in modern usage, but in sort of older Scots, the word dominie was always used for a teacher. So the idea of a schoolmaster was quite sort of unfamiliar. So a chief, a head, a director, or a teacher. That's our kind of first way of looking at it. Yeah. However, it comes from the PIE root, meg, M-E-G. As in, great. As in...
Oh, like
big.
Mega.
Yeah. It means great. And the PIE root also means great, both in terms of size. And so we get cognates like acromegaly, Charlemagne, Charles the Great, maestro, magisterial, magistrate, magnitude, magnanime, magnificat, magnificent. We get words like Mahatma, the honorific that was given to Gandhi. It wasn't his first name. Maharaja, which is just a deliciously fun word to say. Yeah. Majority. There's tons of, you can think of, there's so many words that contain this that have some relation to greatness. And one of the words listed in the Etymon Line list of cognates made me laugh a lot. It's the word mickle, M-I-C-K-L-E. Now, the reason that you're unfamiliar with this word is because it's used in the north of England and it's used in Scotland. However, what made me laugh is it forms part of a proverb that's often trotted out in Scots, and the proverb is "Money a mickle makes a muckle," which, as well as being deliciously good fun to say, doesn't make any fucking sense.
Nope.
And
I know you've broken that one out for me at one point, but I don't think we ever gave into it.
But it actually doesn't make sense. So the general translation given to this phrase, money, which means many a mickle makes a muckle. So the translation that's usually given is all the little things add up to a big thing. So it's like, mighty oaks from little acorns grow, and a journey of a 1,000 miles begins with a single step, that sort of thing. Right. However, this meaning is based on an absolute nonsense. The original quotation would either have said many a little makes a mickle, or some variations have many a pickle makes a mickle, because mickle does not mean a small amount. It's in that list of cognates for good reason. It means a big amount. So while it's good fun to say...
lots of big problems makes a big problem.
Yeah.
Wow, imagine that.
Well, it's good fun to say money a mickle makes a muckle. What you're saying is lots of big things make a big thing.
I mean, if you want a proverb you can't really argue with. Can't get much better.
Yeah. So essentially, etymologically speaking, a master is a big thing. Oh, sorry, I was going to say, we obviously got, in terms of meaning and usage, that sense of control and authority also then became the idea of someone who was the best at a thing. So, a master of Scrabble, a master of... It doesn't literally mean you are the teacher or in charge, but your extreme greatness at that thing conveys upon you the status of master, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah.
So what we essentially have in the show that we love so well is weighing things up with our hands to decide how much they're worth by a big person. And while, it might get him arrested, but I feel like Greg Davies would kind of appreciate that as a gloss for the excellent job that he does on the show that we both love so well.
I think that we've discovered the secret. Like, anyone who watches and loves the show, nobody's surprised by the fact that the most popular one is the one with Greg Davis in the role of Taskmaster. Like, Taskmaster New Zealand is pretty great. Like, I've seen a couple episodes. I like what they do. I'm told that the one in Norway is quite good. I haven't watched it because I think that I would probably lose a lot having zero knowledge of the language that they're all speaking all the time. But I feel like we've established firmly once and for all that the reason Taskmaster UK is the most popular one is because etymologically it just makes the most sense.
It does.
With who's there. I really like that tax connection because, well, for a bunch of reasons, but one is I like having another thing to point to pedants about. So if anyone complains about like harumphing about the very first thing I thought of is ask, and how that's slangified into axe.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Beastie Boys, I'll ask you a question.
Tax and task.
And so tax and it's the exact same transition, but with a T in front and backwards, which is cool. And we already had third and thrid.
Yep.
And so suck it up, people who can't handle this. This has been happening for forever. But now we have a tax and task thing, which is kind of cool. But also the connection of task with punishment brought to mind the expression taking someone to task for something.
I didn't get into all the many kind of phrases, and there are tons, absolutely tons of them.
Yeah. But I like that. That was the one thing that connected to me, which is quite cool. Also, when you saying Charlemagne, Charles the Great, first time I've ever made that connection. And I was like,
I love
what?
it.
Why? What am I doing here?
I mean, I have to say, Charles the Great's a good name, but Charlemagne is better.
Oh, so much better.
So much cooler. Like, who cares what it means? It's just a super cool name. But yeah, Charles the Great. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Also, I taught a kid once called Magnus, who in the classroom I used to nickname Great One.
Yeah.
As in, great one, go on with your work.
I mean, that could backfire depending on the kid, but that's
absolutely.
a logical thing to, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, if your name's Magnus, you're like, nominative determinism is a thing.
Definitely.
They're, whatever they do, they're going to be the guy at it. Like, I'm not making any judgments, but
I always wonder, is there a word for nominative determinism that you really, really don't determine? Like being called Magnus but sucking at everything?
Oh, like sort of an ironic, like the corollary of nominative determinism.
Yeah, like my name is Mr. Peace and I'm an army general, or, but...
Yeah, some sort of just the backwards version.
I do actually know a Dr. Love.
Fair enough.
Yeah, real life Dr. Love. That's a pretty cool one. Anyway.
That is a cool name. Is it an actual doctor or is he a radio DJ?
No. A PhD doctor rather than a physician doctor. But still Dr. Love.
Yeah,
because of course, doctor means
teacher. Reader.
Yeah. Suck it, people who say that First Lady Jill Biden shouldn't call herself doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway. So.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Handicap, Taskmaster.
Taskmaster, Handicap, Taskmaster.
I
Taskmaster
meant to
is a
say
show
too,
that absolutely does not allow for the concept of handicapping anybody and making any playing field level because...
Nope.
It's, yeah.
I love that we talked about golf earlier, but we didn't talk about a golf handicap, which is probably the first time I ever actually heard that word.
Yeah, it gets its own... And I kind of glossed over it because I thought it was a bit silly that the OED had a specific... I mean, it's understandable that it has a specific entry for its use in golf. Because again, yeah, it's probably the most common other place that people have heard it is in the context of a golf handicap. But at the same time, I thought, golf's...
Fuck those golf guys.
A sport... whatever, but...
Dear listener, I should point out I'm unapologetically golfist because I find it quite boring. I don't really get it. I very much ascribe to the sort of truism that golf is a waste of a good walk. It spoils a good walk. That's what we often say here in Scotland. And it is, of course, it's a Scottish sport. It was invented famously in St Andrews, where I went to university for 4 years and then another year after that. And dude, I hate golfers. If I was unsure about whether or not I didn't like golf before I was in St Andrews as often as I was over those 5 years, it was very much set in stone. And I know there are nice golfers out there. My brother and my brother-in-law both devote quite a lot of their time these days to playing golf, unfortunately. But you know, I guess, and what people always, you should try it, and I'm like, that is never going to happen. Like, literally never. Just not interested. I
went to a driving range once and I hit the dude below me. Like, I was on the second or third floor of this driving range and my ball went into the stall directly below me. I broke gravity.
You broke golf.
I broke golf. I broke all of it.
That's incredible, dude.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.